Welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be looking at the 80-20 learner and specifically how we can use this principle to learn more effectively and acquire skills more quickly and just become more efficient in general.
Sounds pretty good to me.
Right. So to help unpack this, we're joined by someone who can extract the most valuable insights from this book.
Well, I'm happy to try.
Awesome. So we're really going to be focusing on this idea of the 80-20 principle and how we can use it to improve our learning. It's got this intriguing idea that you can achieve so much by just concentrating on the things that matter most.
Definitely. It's all about working smarter, not harder, right?
Exactly. And that's what this book, The 80-20 Learner by Peter Hollins, really digs into. So let's get right to it. What is this 80-20 principle all about?
Well, the core idea, sometimes called the Pareto principle, suggests that 80% of our results actually come from just 20% of our efforts.
Oh, interesting. So it's like this imbalance, this idea that not everything we do contributes equally.
That's it. And this pattern, this 80-20 split, it appears in all sorts of areas of life, from business to relationships, and yes, to learning as well.
Makes you wonder what you're spending 80% of your time on and if it's worth it.
You got it. That's the big question. Now, in the book, Hollins gives a few examples. Like, he suggests that maybe 20% of our relationships fulfill 80% of our social needs.
So like a small group of close friends versus hundreds of acquaintances.
Right. Or think about when you read a nonfiction book. He argues that most of the value, like 80%, might be found in just 20% of the content.
You mean like the key chapters, the main takeaways, not all the little details.
Exactly. So if we can identify and concentrate on that crucial 20% in our learning, we can potentially amplify our learning so much more.
It's pretty powerful. Like if you could pinpoint the 20% of study material that really guaranteed success on an exam, you wouldn't have to spend hours poring over every single page.
That's the idea. And it's especially helpful for anyone who feels overwhelmed by just the sheer volume of information out there.
Absolutely. I mean, think about the last time you felt totally swamped with study materials. Do you think this 80-20 rule could have made a difference for you?
Maybe. So in addition to the 80-20 principle, Hollins also talks about something he calls the 85% rule.
Okay, what's that about?
Well, it suggests that we learn best when we succeed around 85% of the time.
So that means we're actually failing the other 15% of the time.
Exactly. But that's a good thing, according to this principle.
Hold on, failing is a good thing. I don't get it. I thought we learn best when we get things right.
Not necessarily. Think about it this way. If we're always succeeding, are we really pushing ourselves, really challenging ourselves?
I suppose not.
Right. Failure in the right amount can be really insightful, you know? It helps us figure out what works and what doesn't so we can fine-tune our approach.
Okay, I see what you mean. So it's about finding that sweet spot, like the right difficulty level in a video game, right?
Right.
If it's too easy, we don't learn anything new, but if it's too hard, we just get frustrated.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance where we're challenged but not overwhelmed. That's where the real growth happens.
So failure, in a sense, can actually be our teacher.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay. Now let's talk about this thing called the DIS framework.
Sure. It's a method that was made popular by Tim Ferriss, and it's all about how to master new skills really fast.
So tell me, what does this DIS framework actually involve?
Well, it's an acronym, DIS-SS, which stands for deconstruction, selection, sequencing, and stakes.
Okay. So what's the first step? Deconstruction, right?
Right. It means breaking down a skill into smaller, more manageable parts.
Ah, so instead of looking at the skill as this big, overwhelming thing, you analyze the individual elements that make it up.
Precisely. Then comes selection, where you identify the crucial 20% of those sub-skills, the ones that will have the biggest impact.
Makes sense, because according to the 80-20 principle, we're not trying to learn everything about the skill, just the essential parts that will give us the most bang for our buck.
Exactly. And after you've identified the key sub-skills, comes sequencing. That's about figuring out the most effective order to learn them in.
So it's like creating a roadmap for yourself,
Yeah,
outlining the optimal path to mastering the skill.
exactly. And finally, there's stakes. This is all about creating incentives to keep you motivated and accountable, you know? Because let's face it, staying motivated can be a real challenge, especially when you're learning something new.
I hear you.
So whether it's setting deadlines for yourself, finding an accountability partner, or even creating rewards for hitting certain milestones, having something at stake can help you stay focused and committed to your learning goals.
Okay, that makes sense. So basically this DIS framework is a way to apply the 80-20 principle to skill acquisition. It's about focusing on the essential elements and streamlining our learning process.
Exactly. Now, how do we apply this to the bigger picture of our goals in everyday life?
That's a good question. It's so easy to get bogged down with all sorts of tasks and activities that don't really contribute to our overall objectives.
That's where the 80/20 principle can be really helpful too. It's about figuring out which 20% of our activities actually move us closer to our goals and then ruthlessly eliminating or delegating the rest.
So it's about being really selective with our time and energy and focusing on the things that truly matter.
Exactly. And it's about constantly asking ourselves, is what I'm doing right now actually bringing me closer to my goal?
That's a powerful question. I think a lot of us could benefit from asking ourselves that more often. It can be so easy to get caught up in busy work that makes us feel productive but doesn't actually move the needle forward.
Absolutely. But with so much information out there these days, how can we even begin to figure out what's essential and what's just noise?
Right. It's like we're drowning in information overload.
That's where the idea of becoming a minimalist learner comes in. It's about cutting through the clutter and focusing on the essential information.
So tell me more about this minimalist learner. How do we become one?
Well, Hollins suggests a three-step process for managing all this information. First, you have to identify what you really need to know. Clarify your learning goals. What specific knowledge or skills are you aiming to acquire?
Okay, so we need to be really clear about our objectives before we even dive into any learning materials.
Precisely. Once you know what you need to know, the next step is to determine how much you need to know. Do you need to become an expert on this topic, or is a basic understanding sufficient?
It's about setting boundaries for ourselves and being realistic about the depth of knowledge we need for our specific purpose.
Right. We don't always need to know everything about everything. And finally, the third step is to assess the value of the information you're consuming. Is it relevant to your learning goals? Is it from a credible source?
So we need to become more discerning consumers of information. That makes a lot of sense, especially in today's world where we're bombarded with content from all directions.
Exactly. Not all information is created equal, and you have the power to choose what you let into your mental space.
This idea of becoming a minimalist learner is so powerful. It's like decluttering not only our physical spaces, but also our minds and even our digital lives. It's about creating a space where learning can flourish.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, I love that. So, what's next?
Well, let's talk about this thing called the 5-hour rule.
5-hour rule. Okay, I'm intrigued. What's that all about?
It's a simple but really powerful idea that involves setting aside just 1 hour each day for focused learning and reflection.
Just 1 hour. That sounds almost too easy.
I know, right? But the idea is that the cumulative impact of that consistent effort over time can be truly remarkable.
I see. It's about making learning a non-negotiable part of our daily routine, just like we do with things like brushing our teeth or exercising.
Exactly. And Hollins highlights a bunch of super successful people like Benjamin Franklin, Elon Musk, Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, who all attribute their success in part to their commitment to continuous learning.
That makes sense. I mean, learning is not a destination, it's a lifelong journey. And it's something we can all do no matter how busy our lives are, even just 1 hour a day.
You got it. So what do you say, up for the challenge?
Hmm. I think I might just be 1 hour a day. That doesn't sound too bad.
It's a small investment with potentially huge returns.
Definitely food for thought. This is a fantastic start to our deep dive. We've covered so much already, and I'm excited to continue exploring these concepts and strategies.
Me too. There's a lot more to unpack, and I'm ready when you are.
Perfect. Let's dive back in.
All right, so let's dig into another really powerful idea, leveraging what you already know. Our brains are these amazing learning machines, right? They're constantly comparing new information to all that stuff we've already learned.
Yeah, that makes sense. We don't just start from scratch every time we learn something new. We bring all our past experiences, knowledge to the table.
Exactly, and Hollins really emphasizes this point. He says that our brains, they handle familiar information so effortlessly. So if we can connect new concepts to that existing foundation, we'll learn much more efficiently.
So it's like building on what we already know, using our current knowledge as a stepping stone.
Precisely. It's about making those connections, seeing how new information fits into the bigger picture of what we already understand. Think about it, like when teachers try to relate new concepts to things students have already experienced, it helps make the learning more relatable and engaging.
Right, it's like bridging the gap between the known and the unknown.
Exactly. Now, Holland suggests a really cool technique for doing this. He says, start each learning session by creating a mind map of what you already know about the topic.
That's a great idea. It forces you to activate your prior knowledge and also helps you identify the gaps you need to fill.
That's it. It's like creating a roadmap for your learning, highlighting the areas where you need to focus your attention. And as you learn more, you can go back and add to that mind map, visually tracking your progress.
I love that. It's like turning learning into this tangible visual process.
Right. And speaking of making learning more tangible, Hollins talks about the importance of forging links between new and old information. If you can relate a new concept to something you already understand, it's much more likely to stick in your memory.
So it's like creating these mental hooks that help anchor the new information in our minds.
He suggests all sorts of techniques for doing this, like using analogies, metaphors, vivid imagery, even personal stories to create these memorable
That
connections.
makes a lot of sense. It's about making learning come alive,
Yeah,
taking it out of the abstract and making it something we can relate to on a personal level.
absolutely. It's all about engaging our brain in a way that makes learning more meaningful and memorable. So, moving on, let's talk about this challenge we all face: information overload.
Ugh, yes. In
Yes,
today's digital world, we are just bombarded with information from every direction. It's overwhelming.
it really is. It can be tough to sift through all that noise and figure out what's actually important. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, becoming a minimalist learner.
Right, being intentional about what we choose to consume, curating our learning experience so we can focus on what truly matters.
Exactly. Minimalism in learning is not about deprivation. It's about creating clarity and purpose. It's about decluttering our mental space so we can focus on the things that really matter.
So it's about simplifying, prioritizing, and creating a learning environment that's conducive to deep focus.
You got it. Now, some people might struggle with learning because they experience fear or anxiety.
That's so true. I think for a lot of people, fear can be a huge barrier to growth and exploration.
Absolutely. So, Hollins encourages us to reframe our thinking about learning. Instead of seeing it as this scary or intimidating thing, he suggests we see it as a privilege, a gift we're giving ourselves.
I like that. Seeing learning as a gift. It takes away the pressure and helps us approach it with a more positive mindset.
Right. And he also suggests breaking down daunting tasks into smaller, more manageable steps, to help overcome procrastination and build momentum. And remember, seeking help when you need it is not a weakness, it's a sign of strength. We don't have to go it alone on our learning journey.
Absolutely. There's no shame in asking for help. We can all benefit from the guidance and support of others. Okay, now I want to circle back to this thing called the 5-hour rule. Can we delve into that a bit more?
Sure. It's this idea of setting aside 1 hour each day for focused learning and reflection.
1 hour a day. It sounds so simple, yet I can imagine the cumulative effect over time would be truly remarkable.
That's exactly the point. It's about making learning a consistent habit, something you prioritize in your daily life.
It's like anything else we want to get good at. If we put in the time and effort consistently, we're bound to see results.
Exactly. And Hollins talks about how successful people, like Benjamin Franklin, Elon Musk, and Oprah Winfrey, they all make learning a non-negotiable part of their routine.
That makes sense. I mean, learning is an investment in ourselves, and it's an investment that pays off in countless ways.
Totally agree. And Hollins has some good tips for how to make the most of that hour. He emphasizes the importance of flexibility, finding a time that works best for you, and creating a dedicated space where you can focus without distractions.
So it's about setting ourselves up for success, creating an environment that's conducive to deep learning.
Exactly. And remember, he also talks about experimenting with different learning styles. Find what works best for you, whether it's reading, listening to podcasts, watching documentaries, or taking online courses. There are so many different ways to learn.
It's about discovering those learning modalities that really resonate with us.
Absolutely. And then don't forget about reflection. Take some time to process what you've learned, make connections to your existing knowledge, and think about how you can apply it in your life.
So it's not just about passively absorbing information. It's about actively engaging with it and integrating it into our understanding of the world.
Right on. And remember those aha moments and those ha moments we were talking about earlier.
Right, those moments of sudden clarity and those instances where we're feeling confused or stuck.
Exactly. Holland says, Pay attention to those moments. Capture the insights from the aha moments and use the ADPT method to work through the ha
The
moments.
EDPT method, right. That's a really helpful framework for breaking down complex concepts and overcoming those moments of confusion.
Exactly. So, as we wrap up this part of our conversation, let's shift gears a bit and talk about setting our own standards for learning.
That sounds interesting. It's easy to get caught up in external measures of success, like grades or certifications. But what if we could define success on our own terms?
That's exactly what Hollins challenges us to do. He encourages us to move beyond those external benchmarks and define our own measures of mastery.
So it's about taking ownership of our learning journey, setting meaningful goals that are aligned with our personal aspirations.
Exactly. He suggests asking ourselves questions like, can I apply this knowledge to real-world situations? Have I developed a deeper understanding? Am I challenging myself enough?
I love that. It's about focusing on the intrinsic value of learning, the joy of discovery, the satisfaction of expanding our knowledge and abilities.
You got it. It's about becoming lifelong learners, constantly seeking new knowledge and embracing the journey of growth and self-discovery.
That's really inspiring. It makes you realize that learning is not just about accumulating information. It's about transforming ourselves and our understanding of the world.
Exactly. And remember that Pareto analysis we talked about earlier, it's a great tool for problem solving in your learning journey too.
Right, that 80-20 approach to identifying and tackling those pesky problems that might be holding us back.
Right. It's about focusing our energy where it will have the greatest impact. Okay, so how are you feeling? Ready to dive into the last part of our deep dive?
Absolutely, I'm all ears.
Precisely. It's all about the stories we tell ourselves about what we're capable of.
I can see how that would have a big impact on our willingness to take risks and try new things.
Absolutely. Hollins says there are two main types of mindsets when it comes to learning. He calls them the fixed mindset and the growth mindset.
Okay, so what's the difference between those two?
Well, people with a fixed mindset, they tend to believe that their intelligence and talents are basically set in stone, that they can't really change them.
So they might shy away from challenges because they're afraid of failing or looking bad.
Right. They might stick to things they're already good at just to avoid that feeling of discomfort or inadequacy.
Whereas people with a growth mindset, they see things differently, right?
Exactly. People with a growth mindset, they believe their abilities can be developed through effort and learning.
So they're more likely to embrace challenges, seeing them as opportunities to grow and improve.
Exactly. They understand that failure is a part of the learning process. It's not something to be afraid of, but rather a chance to learn and get better.
It sounds like having a growth mindset is essential for anyone who wants to become a more effective learner.
Absolutely. Hollins couldn't agree more. He suggests a few strategies for shifting from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset.
Okay, like what? How do we actually go about changing our mindset?
Well, one thing he suggests is to reframe how we view challenges.
Instead of seeing them as threats, we can see them as opportunities.
Exactly. It's a subtle shift in perspective, but it can make a world of difference. Instead of saying, I can't do this, try saying, I can learn how to do this.
I like that. It's about focusing on the possibility of growth rather than getting stuck in our limitations,
Right. And another strategy he recommends is to embrace feedback,
even when it's not positive.
especially when it's not positive.
Okay, that can be tough, but I can see how it would be helpful. It's about using feedback as a tool for improvement rather than taking it personally.
Exactly. It's about being open to learning and growing, even if it means hearing things we might not want to hear.
So it's about being humble, curious, and always willing to learn.
That's a great way to summarize it. And one more thing, Hollins also encourages us to celebrate our efforts and progress, not just our accomplishments.
So acknowledging the journey as much as the destination.
You got it. Focusing on the process rather than just the outcome helps reinforce that growth mindset and keeps us motivated to keep learning and improving.
All right, I'm definitely feeling inspired to take all this on board.
Great. So I think it's time to bring this deep dive to a close. Let's recap those key takeaways, those 10 points we talked about earlier.
Sounds like a plan. Fire away.
Okay, so first up, the 80-20 principle states that 80% of our outcomes come from 20% of our effort. That means focusing on the vital few actions that really make a difference in your learning.
Right, it's about working smarter, not just harder.
Exactly. Now, the second point is all about applying that principle to your learning. So figure out the most important 20% of study materials, those tasks or sub-skills that will give you the most bang for your buck.
Got it. Focus on what's truly essential.
Right. Number 3 is the 85% rule. Remember, optimal learning often involves failing now, 15% of the time. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Those home moments are valuable opportunities for growth.
Failure is a part of the process. I'm getting that.
Good. Now, for mastering new skills quickly, the fourth point is using that DIS framework we talked about. Deconstruct, select, sequence, stakes. It's a powerful way to streamline your learning.
Okay, so break it down, choose the essentials, figure out the best order, and create some incentives to stay motivated.
You got it. Now, the fifth point is all about prioritizing those goals. Always ask yourself, is this activity actually helping me achieve my goal? Cut out the fluff and focus on what truly matters.
Be ruthless with your time and energy.
Exactly. Minimize that information overload. Be a minimalist learner. That's number 6.
Curate that information diet.
Love it. Number 7 is about making time for learning. Invest that 1 hour per day, that 5-hour rule for focused learning, and see those results over time.
Consistency is key.
Absolutely. Point number 8, remember those aha and ha moments. Capture those insights, make connections, and use the ADPT method to work through any confusion.
Stay engaged and curious.
Number 9 is about setting your own standards. Don't let grades or certifications define your success.
It's about owning your learning journey.
Exactly. And last but not least, number 10, Pareto analysis can help you solve problems effectively, identify those root causes, and focus your energy where it will have the most impact.
Wow, that's a lot to take in, but I feel like I have a much better understanding of how to apply the 80-20 principle to my learning now.
That's great to hear. Remember, learning should be an enjoyable and empowering experience. So experiment, find what works best for you, and never stop exploring.
Thank you so much for guiding us through this deep dive. It's been truly insightful.
The pleasure was all mine. And as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave you with a final thought. What if you could only focus on the 20% of learning activities that truly matter to you? What would you choose to learn? What knowledge or skills would you prioritize to make the most significant impact on your life? Think about that, and until next time, keep learning and keep growing.